What up, though? Dwayne Barnes, MPA, back again for another AAS 477. Um, Power to the People, the Fight for Black Liberation, 1968 to 1980. If you're here, you found me via Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and you're here for Independent African American Studies class. I welcome you here today. It's going to be a really good lesson today. We're living in perilous times here where we're seeing in our culture presidential administrations doing whatever they want to do, state legislatures doing whatever they want to do, distraction happening at an all-time high. And I'm doing this class to share my passion, love, admiration for history and culture, but also to help share and mold the minds of tomorrow. When I decided to do the Black Power class, it's because I wanted to raise up our ancestors who were ordinary people, but were willing to do very extraordinary things. I think that we have to have the courage, the bravery, and the social capital, the intellectual capital to do the same thing today. So I'm happy that you're here today. We have a lot of really good information, and let's get started. Oh, before I do all that. So this class meets Wednesdays at 7 o'clock here online on my YouTube page. And we have a chance to go deep in the hole, as deep or as shallow as you want to go. But this is a chance for us to have, what up, though? It's a chance for us to have a conversation around African American studies, especially in the context of yesterday and of today. So let's talk a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. So if you were with me last week, that's what's up. Thank you. If you was with me last week, that was like our week 0, where we did a rundown of my first 2 classes. The first one was AAS 477, Economics of Jim Crow. We looked at Reconstruction, Jim Crow, up until Civil Rights. My class I just finished last June was AAS 477, Power and Protest. It was a civil rights movement, so from 1954 to 1968. And this is my third class here, AAS 477, Power to the People, the Fight for Black Liberation. So let's talk about a little bit of what we're going to talk about today. So today, this is our Foundations of Black Power, an introduction to our topic for this semester. So along the journey, we're going to look at different people, events, laws, movements during the Black Power movement, and together define what Black Power meant, what power to the people meant and means today. We're going to use the Panthers. We're going to use Stokely Carmichael. We're going to use the Panther 21, the Revolutionary Action Committee. We're going to use the Black Arts Movement. We're going to talk about Vietnam. We're going to talk about how Black Power braced itself against blaxploitation movies, the change in the music from soul to funk, how Blacks were on TV more than ever through the Jeffersons, through Good Times, through Sanford and Son. So on the big and the small screen, we were looking to show power in our politics, even in business. Look at how the business in the 1970s went, as it went along. I'm also looking at some of the victories of what civil rights brought. The early 70s, and we know here in Detroit, what up, though? 1973, Coleman Young was elected mayor. So there was still a fight through traditional civil rights as well during this time. So we're going to talk about that and a whole bunch of other stuff. But today we're really going to kind of focus in on how did we get here to this Black Power moment. So, the widespread disillusionment among civil rights activists paved the way for the changing of the guard. As the generation of freedom fighters emerged, the shift was accompanied by a powerful intellectual and arts movement, that's the Black Arts Movement, that championed Black pride and rejected assimilation. So today we're going to specifically look at how we define Black Power through the lens of the ideology of Stokely Carmichael. He was one who officially kind of dropped it on the world, outside of Richard Wright mentioning it in a book, but we'll get back to that. We're going to look at the uprisings and the cultural and legal aftermath of the long hot summer of 67 and how it opened the door for action by militarization of police and the COINTELPRO program. And we're also going to look at how the fight in Vietnam, how we brokered against that as well through the lens of Ali today. So that's kind of what we can get prepared for the conversation today. I want to start though with an opportunity, and I'm going to switch my screen here. I call this, and I don't know how close I can get on it here. Let's see if I can make it a little good. Okay, this probably as big as it's going to get. So I call this my Black Power Matrix. So when you think about Black Power, when you think about the fight for liberation, it didn't just start in the 60s and 70s with this class that we're starting in. So I said, well, let's take a step back. Let's look at Black Power ideology from, and what up though to, Ali in the back. We'll talk about him a lot more today. So when we think about Black Power, and this is just, through my lens here, and there's so much more I could have gone through, but I want to kind of leave it to this to give us an opportunity to kind of have this discussion. And this is a two-way conversation. Drop something in the chat. We can talk questions, comments, disagreements, ideas, and we can definitely, politic that way. So I'll be asking for interaction and interjection as we move forward. But when we think about the fight for Black Power, I start with Frederick Douglass here, and he can start a lot of different ways, any abolitionist. And the idea was freedom. So when we think about Black Power, freedom was one of the first kind of cores of Black Power, Frederick Douglass. Coming right after that, and this is what the first class really centered around, Booker T. Washington, Marcus Garvey, and W.E.B. Du Bois. Booker T. Washington and his economics and do for self perspective, some called accommodation, was looking for Black power through economic means to say, okay, I'll forego some of my political pursuits, some of my social pursuits, and I'm gonna lock the game up. I'm gonna be the plug, I'm gonna be the distribution, I'm gonna be the seller, and you can't do movement in business without me. And we're gonna use that as our way to leverage economic and political power. Some didn't agree with that perspective. Some thought that was taking the easy way out, when in fact, those are some of the things we're still looking to get today. If you go down a little bit further, Marcus Garvey, who was one of the fathers of the Black Power movement that we're talking about today, because his economic, cultural, and political nationalism is exactly what they tapped into the late 60s via Malcolm. If you remember Malcolm X's story, Malcolm X's father was a Garvey preacher. So he got it straight from the source. And it affected his perspective in the Nation of Islam, and we'll get to that too. So Marcus Garvey and his political, cultural, and nationalism and Pan-Africanism, which, has been a very sore spot for a lot of us in the community lately. I'm proud ADOS all day. But when you think about it, there is a conversation and a unity that has to happen among the diaspora because we need each other. In the same light, though, ADOS still has to have a place to maneuver and politically, socially, and culturally as well. So then we get down to my main man, W.E.B. Du Bois. W.E.B. Du Bois was kind of the best of both worlds when you think about it. He had his economic and political Black power was through the talented 10th and assuming all the roles in society you can assume, not just like Booker T wanted to. Well, let's just lock down economics. Okay, well, we can lock down economics. I'm speaking as WEB. We can lock down economics. We can lock down politics. We can lock down enterprise and still be Pan-African in how we move and still be blue-blooded or paper bag and still be, elite in our way as well. And so, his version of Black power came through the talented 10th perspective, which he later, kind of distanced himself from. But at the time, if you read Solar Black Folks, Philadelphia Negro, any of the writing he did with the Crisis magazine and NACP, it was really about using the talented 10th to liberate the rest of us, not just to be, high and mighty by themselves. So I jump a little bit down to Dr. King because that's what we talked about in the last class. His version of Black power was through civil and economic rights. So to say, and he went toe to toe with the ideology of Black Power through one. He and Malcolm were around at the same time, and the changing of the guard between him and Stokely Carmichael, who were out, and we'll talk about it today a little bit. Really having to make that decision on what you want to go to. And if you look at Dr. King's work post 66, it was really teetering towards a lot more economic Black Power kind of sentiment, and it was with the changing of the times. Next, and we'll stop at Malcolm, and we'll talk about Stokely. We won't get to Brother Huey yet. We'll get to him next week. Malcolm X's was, like I said, a derivative of the Garvey movement. So the Nation of Islam believed in social, political, religious self-reliance and nationalism, separatism, which, I think the Honorable Elijah Muhammad doesn't get his just due for instilling that perspective at a time where you needed it. During those times, the war jobs were going on, the 40s, deindustrialization was happening. So you had to have an insulated economic plan to be able to maneuver as a Black man in this country at that time. You still do. And then we get to Stokely Carmichael, who we'll talk more about today, who was was a young person in civil rights and navigated all of those movements, all of those protests we talked about, but later took the mantle to define Black Power and to really re-emphasize the Pan-African perspective after he was exiled from the United States. So I want to take that moment to really kind of sit and level set. Yep, one of our family members was a Garveyite. They went to from North Carolina. They went up to Harlem, and they actually got on the Black Star Line and went. Can you zoom in? Yeah, it wasn't letting me zoom in. But if you're signed up, you are going to get all this information as we move forward. So now that we have kind of a base on what we're defining as Black Power, I want to take another step back and kind of put it in context as well. So I'm going to come up with this timeline here. So over the next 2 weeks, we're in this Black Power, defining Black Power moment, 66 through 68. It's such an explosive time, because in this period from 66 to 68 was where the momentum was birthed, built, and started to be destroyed. And I'm going to tell a story in a way to where you can see how all of our good intention, all of the political ambition, all of the mental gymnastics that we were going through was really undercut by the U.S. government. And that just is what it is. So this week and next week, we'll talk about 66 to 68. This week, we're going to talk more about the riots and how the uprisings and the how they laid the foundation for how the government would respond, and then how we navigated culturally during that time as well. So let's look at this one. So 66 was a really big year. That's when Watts happened. That's when SNCC leadership, Stokely Carmichael, was elected to lead SNCC, and he brought his perspective into SNCC, which was an interracial organization, a classic civil rights organization. John Lewis ran it for years and was one of the big six. It was the year that Black Panther Party for Self-Defense was founded. So that's big in and of itself. It's when Dr. King went to Chicago and tried to take civil rights north, and we talked about that last class. SNCC transformed, and Panther Party. See, what was unique, because that's another part of the story. So as Black Power started to go just as an ideology, before it was defined and an action that you acted upon, the old school civil rights organizations, SNCC and CORE, which were leading the freedom rides and the student marches and all of that stuff, they were disillusioned and starting to want something else. The young people was moving it forward. So SNCC had a leadership change, which pushed them into Black Power. CORE had a leadership change, and we'll talk more about them next week, and was really pulling the movement away from the freedom now, away from the old school civil rights, which still was an amazing thing. Don't get it twisted. I still give my love and props to them, but it was changing. And it culminated with the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense being formed. in 66. Also, here we'll get to this. Uh, Karanga's organization started the first Kwanzaa celebration in 1966, and we'll talk a lot about how COINTELPRO was leveraging a lot of nationalist organizations to do their dirty work. So 67, the long hot summer. We talked about this a couple times. Urban uprisings of 1967, 156 uprisings just during that long hot summer. And that was also an expression of Black power. You know, it's not we putting on our Sunday's best suit and going downtown and waiting for Bull Connor to knock us on the head. Nah, we lighting this motherfucker up. And we're doing it for a reason. And we'll get to that as we move forward as well. The Kerner Commission. LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, the president during the time, he commissioned a task force to figure out what was going on during that time. And one of the best books you can ever read, I'll have it in the list after the class, that really speaks to the true meaning and the true reasons why cities were going on fire and how to address them. It was something that LBJ or no president since has ever touched because it was too real. And then we had some landmark achievements as well. You know, you had Thurgood Marshall becoming the first Supreme Court justice, and Ali resisting the draft, and we'll talk about that today. One thing about the 70s is it was like a checkers and a chess game going on. So you murder and you subdue political activists, but you honor those in society and give positions as well. So it was such an interesting time. We'll see a lot of firsts in the 70s, but you also see a lot of undermining, killing, harassment in the same time. So, but you get take the bitter with the sweet. That's what I want to do a little bit different with this class. Show some of the other side as well. Because not everybody was in civil rights. Not everybody was in Black power. Some people want to go see their favorite movie, Shaft or the Mac, or some people just want to watch Soul Train and tear the roof off his mother and do all that stuff too. So we're going to talk about that because that was still a form of Black liberation at the time. So again, Detroit, Newark, Kerner Commission, Thurgood Marshall of 67, and so much more. You'll get the full timeline in the write-up after this class. I thought I fixed this one. 156 uprisings in the long hot summer, and it was a way for us to let our voices be heard. You remember Dr. King said riots were the voice of the unheard, and so and I'll get into that as we move forward. I thought I changed that one too. And 68 was a very interesting year. It was the year Dr. King was murdered. It was a year that the Orangeburg massacre took place in South Carolina State. More police brutality and a more legal responses to the uprisings and empowering police through COINTELPRO and through laws as well. And also the year where J. Edgar Hoover said the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States is the Black Panther Party, 1968. So a part of the Panther story that we'll tell is really active from 66 to 68, because that's when it was more of a local kind of driven interaction. After 68, they were the threat number one, and yes, when you really start to see the same kind of government tactics or war tactics that were used in South Vietnam were being used right here at home against our soldiers as well. So I said a lot. If you got any questions, if you have anything you want to throw in the chat, go ahead and do that. Did I go through something too fast? Did you not get it? Let me know. Let me know you're still with me. And if we're ready to roll, throw a one in the chat. All right, bad. All right, so here we go. The birth of the Black Power ideology. Let me get my screen right here just a second. So our cast of characters for today, we're gonna be talking about Stokely Carmichael, a little bit about Mary Baraka. We'll be doing that more next week. Max Stanford, who went by Muhammad Ahmed, the leader of the Revolutionary Action Movement. A little bit of Huey and Bobby from the Black Panther Party, Dr. King, LBJ, J. Edgar Hoover. And so let's jump into some of this good stuff here. So defining Black Power, the birth of the Black Power ideology. So 1966. Let me get my deck up here just a little bit, take us through it. So 1966 was a very interesting time. And we're just going to jump in here. If you remember James Meredith, let's see what we got here. Support the community, yep. Enjoyed the section of African American Smithsonian, yep. So James Meredith in 1966 to deal with voting rights. And if you remember him he integrated Ole Miss in 1962. He was more of a lone wolf kind of an individual. I feel him on that. And he said, you know what? I'm doing a march from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi. And he called it the March Against Fear, to show that we don't got to be afraid of these folks, and we can deal with, these backwoods to get to our voting rights as much as we want to and we can. Well, the second day out, he got popped. And it's not funny, but just the irony of it. Somebody pulled out a gun while he was marching down the highway and they popped him. Well, this brought all the civil rights leaders at that time together. Remember, I mentioned during that same time, that's when Stokely was elected chair, McKissick at SNCC, McKissick at CORE, and you still had Dr. King with SCLC, still had NACP, still had all the big boys still rolling together. Well, just a quick kind of update on what SNCC and Stokely were up to. They really got deep into registering people to vote, and they wanted to do that. And in the 1964 Freedom Summer, they went and among other places to Mississippi and was really trying to get the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party to register people to vote, run people for office. And they went to New Jersey, Atlantic City during the presidential convention, the Democratic convention, looking to be seen and heard and sit as the Democrats. Well, after that didn't happen, and LBJ, cut Fannie Lou Hamer off right when she was in the middle of giving her testimony, it really started to sour in the stomachs of the SNCC leadership, especially around Stokely Carmichael. And so he said, fine, I want to get out of this democratic politics anyway. So as we go down in our plight, we're going to go register people to vote. And this is where the Lowndes County pre-Panthers kind of were born. Let's, build in that regard. So they're doing a lot of voter registration, but not as Democrats, as freedom organizations, as freedom parties, as a way to say, well, we don't want to be Democrats no more. They shady. We don't want to roll with them. We want to have our own people get elected to our own positions that represent our perspective. And so to make a long story short, while they were out on that, if you remember Greenwood a couple years ago, Killer Mike and my man from Grey's Anatomy, Jesse Williams, they started the bank out of Greenwood, but in Greenwood, Mississippi, that's where Stokely Carmichael dropped, we want Black Power. And it was a thunderstorm in a good way, because it forced two things. It forced Dr. King's hand, because at that time he getting tired of all this mess. He done been to Chicago, he done back down south, he done deal with all he had to deal with, and this is kind of saying, dang, this is shaking me up. And so you got the youth saying, we want Black Power, and the media took it and they ran with it, saying, what is it? Are you saying this isn't? Are you saying the fight for civil rights ain't Black Power? Are you against Dr. King? Same thing the media would do today. And so it really took, I'll take a step back. The birth of the idea of Black Power came through Stokely and those SNCC characters who were down there registering people to vote and hearing what people wanted, hearing what people needed. I'm also always going to show love to Stokely because he went to Howard. Shout out to HU. You already know that. But he really was feet on the ground and saying, for me, Black Power, and this is speaking of Stokely, is economic, political, social, cultural power to self-determine. to do what I want to do the way I want to do it, not have to fit into your system, not have to be you, not have to do it your way, do it our way, because I'm black. I'm not a Negro, I'm black. And I don't have to allow myself to be hit over the head and be nonviolent. I don't have to sit back and allow for you to beg for you to get these rights. I can fight for them myself. That came from the seeds of Malcolm. Even during the Selma March, if you even remember the movie, if you didn't do the science on it, it was Snick and Stokely and them who brought Dr. King down, who brought Malcolm X down to Selma, and he met with, and Dr. King was in jail, and he met with Malcolm X met with Coretta Scott King and say, you know what, I can, let's kind of work together on this. I'm not with the mother cats no more. I'm seeing things a little bit different. Maybe I can give them as the power structure down there a choice. Either you can do it my way or you can do it Dr. King's way. And it took Dr. King and them a lot of swallowing their pride to say, he didn't say all this. He didn't call us Uncle Tom's. He didn't call us all this. He didn't call me all that. I don't even know if I want to do it. But Malcolm X gave a speech down in Selma at the same time, and that's what kind of made them say, well, we rather do it Dr. King's way than do it this brother's way. So, seeds of Malcolm was so deep into the Black Power movement, and we'll talk about it even a little bit more with how the Black arts movement officially kind of bloomed. Amiri Baraka was, a follower of Malcolm X, and at his assassination, or after he was assassinated, Baraka left the village and went to Harlem and started Bart's, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. So, 1966, at the Fight for Freedom, I was gonna say the Fight for Freedom Fund dinner, at the March Against Fear for James Meredith is where the ideology was born. Now, also, it was being born culturally as well. One of my favorite songs and one of James Brown's favorite songs, most famous songs, is "Say It Loud." I'm black and I'm proud. So you're starting to see this black and this proud from, so back in the 60s or early 60s, it was more Motown, baby. We're gonna have on a suit, we're gonna talk right, we're gonna dress right, I'll be with Dr. King, we're gonna go put on our Sunday's best, we're gonna look for assimilation into society. Late 60s into the 70s said, hell no, I'm black, my hair is nappy, my nose is big, my people from Africa, I want a new name, I want self-determination. So it was a really big changing going on. And so this kind of Black Power ideology kind of split the movement in two. One, those who wanted to go a revolutionary perspective, and those who wanted to continue on the successes of civil rights. They like, well, look, I'm with you on the Black Power tip. I want my power too, but we didn't fought. Folks done died. Babies done been shot. Folks done been lynched. We done marched. My head done been busted. I want the fruits of my rewards. It's been a civil rights bill. I want to see that through. It's been a voting rights act. I want to see that through. It's been a housing legislation. I want to see that through. So I am with you for burning this motherfucker down, but I want my peace. I earned it. I marched for it. I got hit over the head for it. I freedom rolled for it. I set in for it. So I ain't ready to give up on society yet. And if you think about going back to my core of my first class about economics, Jim Crow economics, there was a Du Boisian perspective. You can even see it today. If you turn on your favorite news anchor or your favorite perspective, you're gonna hear Du Boisian people like, no, let's keep the society intact. I want fairness. I want my piece of it. They can't do that. They can't do that to the Democrats. They can't do this. They can't do that. It's unfair. And then you have others saying, look, we need to worry about us, for us, by us, doing it our way. And then you have some people like, look, I'm getting out of here. So you still have these perspectives kind of raging on today. And so the civil rights work was through elections, through lawsuits, the NAACP, how they got it through civil rights, through the quotas that were supposed to be coming through government intervention, through the piece of the American pie, through enjoying capitalism. So a lot of those things were there. Let's see how we're doing for time. Looking pretty good. Yeah, so this divergence from civil rights, this cultural expression through the Black arts movement. Now, I'm going to touch on Black arts movement today. We're going to get bigger into that movement as we go into the class. So, just for the sake of being able to tell a story, if Amiri Baraka was the father of the Black arts movement, then Sonia Sanchez was the mother of the Black arts movement. These are writers, these are playwrights, these are poets, these are people who said, you know what, we have to find a way. And I see. I want to change what I was about to say. Anytime that there is a revolution happening, it's coming from a lot of different ways. It's coming through politics and those who are brave enough to stand up to the power, like we're seeing today with some mayors, with some people in elected office. You have artists coming together saying, you know what, we have to use our art to express our politics and express ourselves. We don't have to use their standard as the standard. And then you also have a people sick and tired of doing it one way and ready to move to the other thing. So the Black Arts Movement, so none of this stuff was calculated. Because I don't want to make it seem like that. None of it was like, oh, it just happened. They came together and said, we're going to do Black Arts Movement today. No, it was people who was finding community and finding tribe and saying, you know what? I don't want to write this like this no more. I don't want to chase after that no more. I'm thinking more about this. And somebody's like, oh man, I like that. I was thinking the same thing. I wrote more about this. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. So it wasn't like they got together in a room and said, we're going to start it right now. No, it was people who just said, you know what? I spit this little piece here and they was feeling me. And we got together and we got together and we got together. And the next thing you know, it blew up. And so when I say the mother and father of Black Arts Movement, I'm talking about, you know, people who were seeing eye to eye on concepts, people whose art was already moving and said, you know what, we can move this thing to move the way we want. Before his name was Amiri Baraka, he was Leroy Jones. And he was a hell of a writer then and became a hell of a writer and poet as Amiri Baraka. And Sonia Sanchez the same way. So, you know, the Black Arts Movement has its seeds in Harlem. But if you know anything about this area, it was three main areas. And then I'll move on in the story. Harlem and New York and New Jersey was a center point. The nexus between Detroit and Chicago, it blew my mind because I know a lot of Detroit history. I didn't know that the Black Arts Movement had roots here. One of the publishers, the biggest publishers during that era was from here in Chicago, and then out west where the Panthers were. So every city, same way in civil rights, every city had a movement because everything is local. So just because I'm not in those few cities doesn't mean my blackness wasn't shown in other ways. So just like the student sit-ins hit across the country, this Black Arts thing was moving everywhere you went. You could have went to Gary, you could have went to Santa Fe, you could have went to Dallas, you could have went to Atlanta, Houston, could have went to Battle Creek. Anywhere you went, it was people saying, I'm with that, and that's what I'm building. But for the purpose of the stories, we'll focus on those few areas. And how it was like they said the Black Arts Movement was the sister, the artistic sister or brother to the Black Power movement. So they worked together. Yep, the assassination, Bart's. So the Bart's was the school that Amiri Baraka started right after Malcolm X was killed. The Black Arts Repertory Theater in school. It was supposed to be a moment, a place that you picked your talent, you shared your talent, you nurtured talent, and you found a way to share it locally and around the world. And then RAM, and we'll get to them next week. RAM was a student organization started at Central State. Shout out to Central State. They're going to be here this Saturday at a classic football game. And my brother-in-law went to Central State, who got connected with Malcolm early in the process. It was kind of a precursor to the Panthers, and we'll talk about them next week. But they were, you know, one of the first to start to receive some of this attention from COINTELPRO and these government organizations, even as the Panthers were gearing up. In addition to what was going on in the civil rights movement. So let's get to some of this kind of interesting stuff happening here. So we talked about any questions, any feedback, anything, throw something in the chat. I don't want to just be talking at you. If you got questions, throw them in. If you got comments, feel free to throw them in. Yep, social movement so important. Yep, say it loud. Yep, yeah. And so, you know, this is such a time as now that we need to be hearing this stuff. So in America, you know you ain't about to burn this motherfucker down and not have some repercussions. And so this was a very interesting kind of thing. So we're going to talk about the urban rebellions. And I like to go riots, rebellions, uprisings. I call it whatever I want to. I know what my people was trying to do. And the aftermath culturally and the aftermath politically and legally. So you know you're not going to burn it down without some repercussions. But at that point, people was ready to. So just a quick primer. Great Migration. Our ancestors moved from Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Florida. They moved to New York. They moved to Michigan. They moved to Chicago. They moved to California. They moved everywhere. And so it was a demographic change happening in America. We came up north looking for jobs, looking for opportunities. Yep, and to get buy-in from the community. Yep. How does someone start a local movement? I'll say this. It really comes, it's a people thing. It's always a people thing. We're going to see, even as we talk about how the Panthers and other radical organizations rose, you know, and I'm a quick aside on this one. So you could be like, okay, we all live in the city. We all live on the west side of the city. All right, well, we see ourselves as the Revolutionary Brothers. Other people across the street who you ain't cool with, who's still in the revolution, said, okay, we going to call ourselves the Malcolm X team. And we all gonna do our own thing in building this, and it kind of happened that way. It's always about people. It's always about people in the meeting of the minds. And we'll see as we tell the story, the government used just the differences in how our people came together to pit them against each other to do the other people's work. But yeah, to me, it all starts just local. Everything is local. Even when you think about the civil rights movement, and that's what I was trying to get across. In Birmingham or in Montgomery for the bus boycott, they said, we're tired of not being able to get on the bus. We're going to politically organize ourselves to have an outcome. Panthers, they didn't start saying, we're about to be a national organization and we're going to have chapters all across the world. Nope. Police are doing too much brutality. We're willing to step up and monitor this local situation. All things are local. All these movements are local. They end up hitting nationally and people want to join in, but everything starts with their nexus is always a local situation. Even if a chapter of the Panthers sprouted in, you name the city, it was to deal with a local issue. Now, at that time, just a lot of the issues were the same. So that's just kind of my thoughts on there. I grew up in the 60s, so I saw a lot of this play out. Right. And so there were two main responses to the legally to what happened, and I'm gonna drop this deck off here just so I can talk a little bit without it in my face. There was two main responses to the riots and the uprisings from the president and from the government. One was the Kerner Commission. The Kerner Commission was a group of 11 people, a task force of 11 people who LBJ, President Lyndon Baines Johnson, put together to answer three questions. What happened? Why did it happen? And what can we do to prevent it from happening in the future? And if you look at the book called The Kerner Commission Report, it was one of the most best-selling books ever. And it's I'm going to drop the link to it, but it's a mind-blowing document. And if you don't have enough time to read the book, I have read the book. You can watch the Riot Report, an hour version documentary of what came from that. And it's a very unique and interesting document in that it's one of the few that actually tells the truth about injustice, structural and systemic racism, and how it affected the people and why they ended up doing what they did. So the Kerner Commission was one. The other part of this, and I'm telling this story for a reason, this way that before I get to the Panthers, the other part of it was laws and agency given to the agencies to do some very, very, very nefarious things. So on that side, it was the Law Enforcement Act of 1965, which opened the Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice, which basically, and I'll get into it deeper later, but basically said, we're going to take local government, local policing connected to the government, the federal. We're going to empower them through weapons, through surveillance, through federal power. And we're going to get these motherfuckers up off the street. That's either one, doing the rioting, or two, looking to build revolutionary power. And then later on, you saw the Omnibus Crime Bill, Safe Streets Act of 1968. Remember when we said when Hoover said what he said about the Panthers? They was backing it up with the military power. So you fighting a war in Vietnam, and you also fighting a war at home against people here who are anti-war or anti-establishment. And then you had the Gun Control Act of 1968. So you had laws being put in place to make sure that you don't get what you want, or that the revolutionaries didn't get what they want. And then you had some underground nefarious things happening through the COINTELPRO program, or the counterintelligence program, coming out of the FBI with J. Edgar Hoover, using stealing, what we say, that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, doing all that against our revolutionary activists and anti-war brothers during that time. So let's start with the Kerner Commission first, and then we'll get to COINTELPRO and some of the laws. Where are we on time? Doing pretty good. So like I said, the Kerner Commission was an 11-member group, and it only had 2 brothers on it. One, a Republican brother named Ed Brooke, a senator, and Roy Wilkins, who was the head of the NAACP. Now, the 11-people commission was made up of mayors, governors, Congress people from the cities and the states where all of these uprisings was happening. The 3 questions: what happened, why did it happen, and what can be done to prevent it from happening in the future. And it was kind of broken down into 2 big segments. Wait, hold up. I just saw that under my screen. Let me catch up here. LBJ on Law and Policies, Kerner Commission. There we go. Make sure we're good. So people who are watching the video later, they'll be able to know where I'm at. Let's hide that. There we go. It was broken down into 2 kind of parts. Root causes, to look at, the research around what really happened, what was the root of this, and then law and order, how in a policing and an authoritarian way can, what happened in that regard. So it first started with the process, 20 days of hearings. They subpoenaed everybody: Dr. King, J. Edgar Hoover, intellectuals, mayors, governors, revolutionary, you name it, you got subpoenaed in to talk about what the heck was going on. And this was, they were taking notes. They were, ensuring that they heard everything from everywhere. And I'm gonna tell you why as we move forward. The next part, as you move forward, they had survey teams. They sent out social scientists to 23 cities from DC. Okay, go out to these cities, the ones that were the hardest hit, some that was just a blip. We just want to figure out what's some of the common threads here. They sent out field investigators to talk to businesses, to civil organizations, to police officers, to communities. They went in barbershops, they went into homes. If for some reason, like Watts, Detroit, a couple of them happened with a cop did something to somebody and things blew up. Well, your son was the one that, okay, let's talk about. Or you were out there, you got arrested. Let's talk to you about anything that was happening. They was talking to people. They even went through the FBI report. So after, and this is the part I didn't really get into in either class. So, when the uprisings happened, folks, they rioted, they looted, they set fires, it was fights, it was all kind of things. But during that time, and this was kind of precursor to some of these laws we're talking about, it was always federal military action, especially on the big ones, Watts, Newark, Detroit, where the federal government came in through the National Guard. Sounds kind of familiar, right? If you've been keeping up with the news, the federal government through the National Guard was coming in and ending the escalation. Well, I'll say they were ending it, but after you've, kind of rioted, looted, got that, stop feeling some type of way for that moment, you was ready to be done anyway. I don't want the cops to get me. So they were sending the federal government. The federal government would put the fire out, so to speak. And so there were a lot of FBI reports in all these 156, cities worth of uprisings, what were going on. So a part of the Kerner Commission was even going back through those FBI reports and figuring out, what was going on through there. There were riots in Battle Creek too. Yeah, in the chapter. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. It was every city, because the thing about America at that time, and some would even say at this time, police brutality, economic hardship, education lacking, housing, all these things happen everywhere. It's structural. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's when, so people say there's no such thing as structural racism. The factors that keep certain people down happen everywhere, in every city. And there are talented temps that make it out. There are a few middle-class people that's just over that. But more times than not, even if you straight, your cousin ain't, your auntie them ain't, your niece them ain't, somebody ain't along the way. We all know somebody that always got the man's foot on their back one way or the other, whether they found their way into it or not. So as it went, some of the early findings were coming back, and some of the early findings were, well, I'll say this, and I'll be quick about it because I know we got to move forward in our time. So you put together these conservatives, these liberals, these couple of black folks, couple of sympathizers, couple of people who just there because the president told me to be there and I'm gonna be there. You had to really work through a lot of issues all the time. And so as some of the first set of information was coming back, you had people like, man, this is bullshit. These blacks just want to do what they do. And then other people like, man, this is crazy. I can't believe it. I knew it was bad, but I didn't know it was that bad. And so you got to the point where the first round of findings were coming back. And, they were saying, it's two types of racism, de jure and de facto. De jure was more the North. Not by saying, hey, near, you can't come here. It's just, hey, man, you don't go over there. You don't walk that way. You know how they do it in the North. And they found out that people were protesting due to that kind of racism, happening in unions, happening with jobs, happening with redlining with realtors. They start seeing how the federal government were underwriting this suburbanization through folks being left out of the GI Bill even after they served. How taxes were being, my son loves Hamilton, and a part of that is, no taxation without representation. Well, a lot of that was happening in the black community too. You know what I'm saying? We just didn't get the same wonderful story as Hamilton and them got. And so they're starting to see this coming together, and they're also starting to see that the police department was a common factor in every city uprising, every last one of them. Cop did something to somebody during that time that blew everybody up. And so some people like, nah, this can't be true. This can't be right. But every city telling the same story, every incident, even the conservative black, even the shop owner said, well, we were in the shop and the cops came and then something happened. So it just, the stories really started to come out. And even though you had your political leaning, your political bias, you said, man, this is what we can't do. The president may not want us to write this, so I don't know yet. This, I'm speaking on like I'm now. And so, and I mentioned earlier, the Great Migration changed the population, and the Law Enforcement Act of 1965, which was, so LBJ had a war on poverty and a war on crime. These two kind of seemingly different programs where we want to provide opportunities, welfare. We want to get, we're going to pass civil rights laws. We're going to make sure things are a little bit better. But the war on crime said, we're going to get them, at the same time. And so once the Law Enforcement Act comes, they're starting to weaponize some of the programs that were meant for good. So, we want a community police. We want to find a way to maybe connect with the youth and connect with these youngsters before they start taking that wayward road in some of them urban communities. Well, that turned out to be, used for their harm. So instead of saying, okay, we'll run a youth program and we'll have a basketball team. Well, that's a way just to get everybody's name, get everybody's number, who they're affiliated with, who their friends are. We'll give out turkeys, and we'll go give out toys and Christmas and turkeys during this time. Well, now we know what their families are. We know who are coming. We know who aren't coming. We're setting up profiles in the community. We're doing surveillance. So it's like, damn, man, y'all even coming at the people that way. But they're saying we're trying to get ahead of some of this rioting stuff. And all the rioters are saying is we just trying to get a piece of the pie. And so again, that disconnect between the two. Another issue was over policing in black communities. If you look at what happened during the Detroit uprisings, it was cops raided a blind pig after hours spot. If you looked at what happened in Watts, a driver was suspected of drunk driving and a cop went bananas on everybody in the car. If you look at what happened in Newark, these are some of the biggest ones. The beating of a cab driver by a cop, which blew up Newark. Mary Baraka's from Newark, and we'll talk more about him, in that regard as well. And so at that time, now you're starting to see the Vietnam War starting to kill LBJ politically, anti-war starting to happen. So, this is an interesting thing. We'll talk about this more later. While we were looking for civil rights and revolution, you started to have the children of these people in power saying, no, don't draft me to go to South Vietnam. I don't want to go either. So they anti-war, they anti-establishment. And it came to a head with the shooting at Kent State in 1968, where they was even shooting down their own. You know what I'm saying? So what you think they was going to do to our people? So you got this dissent happening in this state, in this country, And then you got this law and order president emerging, Tricky Dick Nixon, who got into a lot of stuff similar to what we're going through now. Nope, this is a law and order thing. We're going to nail everybody to the cross and it's going to be over. So it's a lot of parallels between then and now. We just a little more, relaxed and tick-tocked and middle-classed away from some of the things that they was going through back then. And so the writing began for this report, and it was pissing the president off and saying, look, I got you guys together to say, y'all, I wanted y'all to basically say these Great Society programs that the president did were so great, and we don't know why these Negroes are doing this, and we don't understand it, and we gave you your laws and gave you all this stuff. Why are you doing it? When they came back saying, well, look, man, we found out that this is the issue. These are the issues. And so he looked to cut the budget for it. He wanted to end it. And so they hurry up he moved the deadline up and said, get it out. Okay, we're going to get this thing out. And they got it out. The president saw it and tried to hush it. But just so happened somebody in somebody's circle leaked it to the press and said, if you don't get it out, we're going to report on it. And to make a long story short, it was shorted in the press and it came out. So these were the findings. This is going to blow your mind, yo. Real talk. So the findings said, and this is straight out of the commission report, white racism was the root cause. The commission concluded that pervasive white racism, not black extremism, was the fundamental driver of the riots, creating systemic disparities and fueling resentment. It also said that there's two societies, and that was one of the classes I did last time, two societies. Our nation is moving towards two societies, one black, one white, separate and unequal. And then also the last one said there were disparities in each of the following areas. One, housing, systemic neglect, crowded, inadequate housing in black communities, creating ghettos. Two, employment, high unemployment and lack of job training opportunities contributed to the feelings of powerlessness. Three, education, inequitable education opportunities further marginalized black communities. Four, law enforcement, brutal, racist police practices and discrimination in the justice system are pushing blacks to the breaking point. And then finally, neglect by white society. The commission delivered a strong indictment of white society for isolating and neglecting the African Americans. And so this was, it pissed the president off. It emboldened the civil rights leaders to say, told y'all we wasn't just out here being a fool. And it gave a battery pack to the revolutionaries to say, even though they know this, they still don't care. We need to do it our way. And so these findings came out, and it was kind of like a letter to white America. We'll talk about Stokely and his perspective on that letter later, saying, you guys kind of oversaw this. You got the GI Bill when they didn't. You said it was fine. They redlined people out. You said, oh, that's fine. They didn't give people jobs. You said that was fine. But now you scared and you're nervous and you're trying to get guns because now riots happening and you ain't do nothing about it. And so to make a long story short, the president said he never read it. He said it was the worst piece to ever come out of his commission. He damn near tried to red or blacklist everybody on that commission. It also called for mass federal intervention, racial integration, programs to help black folks and the like. And so there's two other things happening during this time. During this time, the conservatives are making their way. You see what the liberal president did? He gave them all these civil rights laws and they still burnt shit down. They still ruining this country. So let's rally this country and make it ours again. Let's make it great again. Kind of similar to where we are, right? That's how Nixon got in. And then you had people saying, well, I was with them when they were We Shall Overcome It. And when I could see dogs and hoses, that made me feel sorry for them. But now they burning cities down. What else do they want? We gave them the civil rights law. What else do they want? What do they want? And so you started to lose the support you had because the truth was coming out. And then this commission report came out and people was like, oh, how dare you? How dare you? The Karens came out, the Kens came out and said, hell no, give me Nixon. Give me the white, because white is right. That's what they did. This is exactly what happened. And we'll see after 1968, Nixon he won the presidency and started law and order. And a lot of what we are seeing now is a lot of what Tricky Dick Nixon did in his time. And so to make a long story short, there was no action on it. There was no movement on it, and we were moving to more of a law and order society. So that was, the Kerner Commission in a nutshell. And the documentary Riot Report, if you got Prime, you can watch the documentary called Riot Report. If you want to find the Kerner Commission report, you can find that on Amazon as well, or your local bookstore, wherever you want to. I recommend at least watching the documentary. It's only an hour. It's on Prime. It's a hell of a watch because not many commissions and task force really tell the truth about an issue. And it was so true. No other president has used it. That was one of the critiques that people had on President Obama. They told you what was going on. You ain't even use it. But, I digress on that one. So the other way, and let me make sure I'm still moving forward here with this ideological, Dr. King. So I missed that. So, in 1968, Dr. King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee. And after his death, this is after the Kerner report, the findings came out in February of 68. Dr. King was murdered April 68. And the story is this was the fuel that Dr. King needed to take his economic plan back to the government and say, see, I told you this was going on. But he got assassinated, and 100 cities went up after so this is after the long hot summer of 67, after Watson 66, after the long hot summer of 67, 100 more cities went up right after Dr. King. And so now you're getting, this is April, and that November you would get Tricky Dick Nixon elected. In January he would be taking over in 69. And so they went up again, and for these same reasons. And this was really a turning point for Black Power. And we'll get to the Panther side of this next week, because this is 68. Panther started 66. By 68, they moving and grooving. This really turned the movement in a different way to say, if y'all gonna kill the man who said he nonviolent, that was your last, that was it. That was all you had for me. So you saw people saying, we're gonna defend ourselves in this regard. So let's look at some of the legal responses here before we get to our good buddies in COINTELPRO, and I'm saying that tongue in cheek. Let me pull this up here 1 second. Any questions, any feedback, anything that you want to drop on me while I pull this up? Hope you're appreciating the class. Hope you're having a good time with it so far. So let's talk about the law enforcement. Where is it at? First, let's talk about the Law Enforcement Act of 1965, which created the Commission on Law Enforcement and the Administration of Justice. So the Law Enforcement Act was the Law Enforcement Assistance Administration was the agency within the U.S. Department of Justice. It administered funding to state and local law enforcement agencies, field programs, research, state agencies, etc. But what it really did was it funneled federal money and federal intelligence to local police. So as you had Panther chapters sprouting everywhere and other revolutionary organizations, it wasn't just the Panthers. It was, I'll say this, every city had their own version of a Black Panther party as far as we want to organize and deal with some of our local issues. Some said, you know what? I like what they're doing out in Oakland. I want to be a part of that, and we going to call ourselves the Panthers. Other people said, we are students against a fascist society. Some people said we the Soul Brothers from 8th Avenue. Some people said we West Side. Some people said we New Era Detroit, or whatever you want to call them. You know what I'm saying? But all of these other revolutionary organizations were sprouting up. And so law enforcement needed a lot more to get it done. So when you take the riots that happened to say, well, we got to stop it some way. We got to militarize some of our local police, because that's how we stop the riots from happening in the first place. So that happened. And so now you have agencies, you have funding to local police, you have military style weapons, military style intelligence, and you have a green light to say we don't want no other riots happening, and we damn sure don't want no messiahs building up during this time. So that's what we got there. Let me get my banner going here. LBJ and his stuff. And then later, the Omnibus Crime Bill. Later, the Gun Control Act, and the militarization of police and the impact on civil liberties. Kerner Commission in this report, we already talked about that. COINTELPRO. So this is a program housed in FBI that, so there's a long history to it. I won't get into all of the history. I'll just start it with where it hit our community. If you go back to any time, I'll make it easy. If you've seen the movie Selma and you've seen the movie Malcolm X, you remember when Malcolm X went overseas and those people was following him around when he was in Africa. You remember the people who was monitoring his calls, calling him night after night after night. You remember on the movie Selma, the movie Selma was brilliant in that they used FBI files to kind of tell the story of how they followed Dr. King. So J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI used the counterintelligence program to monitor and survey and illegally wiretapping all of that. Anybody that wasn't affiliated with what their goals were. And they operated from 1956 to 1971. But some think it's still moving today, which I wouldn't be surprised. So their targets were supposed to be initially on the Communist Party, but it went later to include Black nationalist groups, particularly the Panthers, civil rights organizations like the SCLC, that was Dr. King's group, CORE, the Congress of Racial Equality. Remember I said they had to change over to Black Power. SNCC, anti-war, any left movements. They even did some surveillance on white supremacists and KKK, a little bit of everybody. But they really got their rocks off on, running around on us. And this is a story that's going to go throughout the entire class. So I'm just setting up kind of the tea leaves of what they were doing, what they were looking to do, how they were doing it. But as you tell the story of the Panthers, as you tell the story of Black arts movement, as you tell the story of funk music, as you tell the story of Blaxploitation, as you tell the story of elected mayors, in cities and other Black election stories, as you tell the story of Black business, COINTELPRO was everywhere. They were digging in and making sure they had either informants or they had information on everything. So that we're going to be talking about them until the class is over, as long with the freedom fighters. If you remember the movie, and I say the movie because I'm trying to make it easy. If you remember the movie American Gangster, it was two stories. It was Frank Lucas's story and it was the cop's story. That's kind of how this is. You're going to see what the cops was up to. You're going to see what the revolutionaries was up to in all the regards. And you're going to see where it overlapped and how, given an unlimited budget and an unlimited access to war weaponry, how COINTELPRO did their job, but it still didn't stop us from moving forward. So their main tactics were surveillance, infiltration, and they used infiltration something so scandalously. And we'll talk about it moving forward. Psychological warfare, spreading misinformation, creating internal conflicts, damaging reputations, damaging alliances, etc. Harassment, running up in Panther offices, rifling through people's stuff, arresting you for nothing, and then hold you in there for 2 years and say, "Oh, we ain't have nothing on them," and then violence, folks being killed straight up. I do want to read this though. I do want to read this. Their goals will blow your mind. And let me pull it up here. Give me a second here. And we're gonna frame our discussion around the Panthers with this here, as we move forward here. Here were the goals. 1, prevent a coalition of Black militant nationalist groups. So you didn't want no coalition. 2, prevent the rise of a Black Messiah who could unify, electrify the militant Black movement. 3, prevent violence on the part of Black nationalist groups, which we weren't doing, and they weren't doing at all. 4, prevent militant Black nationalist leaders from gaining respect in the community. Discredit them in 3 separate segments of the community. 5, prevent long-range growth of Black militant organizations, especially among youth. 1973, hip-hop is born in the midst of this COINTELPRO situation. To do this, they're going to use surveillance, infiltration, psychological warfare, harassment, and violence. So a part of the story, and it's fair, but it's unfair too. A part of the story is saying, man, so you wouldn't put me in movies in the 50s. You damn sure wouldn't put me unless I was Sidney Poitier in movies in the 60s. But in the 70s, you would put me in blaxploitation. You'll make me a pimp. You'll make me a Mac. You'll make me a womanizer. You'll make me all these things. While in real life, we got freedom fighters trying to get laws passed in the civil rights direction or revolution or all these things. Or, yep, you'll let me dance on TV for Soul Train. But when we want to have a Black Studies course here, you won't let me do that. So the blaxploitation and some of the entertainment, some of their tactics were, now this is not this is not bringing any shame to any of our artists, any of our very talented people who benefited, but it was a part of government strategy. We got to distract these kids. We don't want them becoming the next Huey Newton. Go dance on Soul Train. Watch what y'all doing there. See what they're doing on the funk music. See what's going on and what's happening, or with JJ and them. Oh, damn. No, don't have them focus on political action. Have them watch the TV. Give them some oil sheen. Do all this stuff. So it was a lot happening during that time in this COINTELPRO program. Exactly. That's why they did that with the music. Yep, the same way they're trying to do Jasmine Crockett. Yeah. And if they have it their way, she won't even be elected anymore, which is crazy. But it still happens today. So COINTELPRO, we'll talk about their long story, and it becomes a very sad part of the story. That's why I want to talk a little more about the music, a little more about what was going on in movies, what was going on with Black elected officials, what was going on in business, what was going on in civil rights. Because if you just want to talk about what happened to our revolutionaries, that's an easy story to tell. Government came, they saw, they conquered. We helped them through infiltration. The government turned a blind eye and they did what they wanted to do. But that seed stayed alive. That's why when you think about the early hip hop acts like Public Enemy and some of this early stuff that kept that alive, and why it switched to that NWA kind of, which I listen to too. But this thing is real. So I want to put more culture in here so we didn't just have to tell the sad story about how Bunchy Carter was murdered or how Fred Hampton got murdered or all these sad stories. Even in my research, I was like, man, I got to find a way to tell a story that's a little more uplifting than just that. Because I was sitting here, a couple weeks like, oh, I can't do this, bro. Can't do it. Can't just talk about the riots and COINTELPRO. I can't do it because it was too much on the heart. I said, nah, even though, so I had to open up my lens on what Black liberation looked like. Well, you know what? I want to be an actor so bad. I saw Sidney Poitier on that screen in the 70s. While I might have been playing the pimp, or I might have been playing the hoe, or I might have been playing whoever I was playing, I was able to be in a movie on TV, and I achieved that. And I put my money back into the movement, or I just felt good being a star. Where it wasn't no JJ before that. You wasn't know What's Happening Kid, Dynamite on network TV. It wasn't no Sanford and Son on TV. You didn't know what was going on in the Black community through music and through fashion until Soul Train came, and they made millionaires out of that. So even though it wasn't Black liberation through a political or through a revolutionary, it was one through an artistic. You would have never got a chance to hear some of the Black arts movement poetry mainstream if those doors weren't open. So it's a gift and a curse of what happened during that time. And COINTELPRO, I believe, played a big part in all of that. So we talked about some of this stuff here. Okay, last part of my conversation today, and I love the feedback today, is I want to talk a little bit about how we were navigating, how Black power in Vietnam came hand in hand. So there's 3 or 4 stories I want to tell throughout the time. One is about Ali here at the beginning of the story. Next is about the Bloods of Vietnam. If you saw the movie Five the Bloods by Spike Lee, it's on Netflix. It's about these brothers who served in Vietnam, who left. Was Chadwick Boseman's last movie. It showed these 5 brothers that went back to get something that was buried there, and it kind of tells their story. Because Vietnam came, and if you and I see, I don't want to make it this sad, so I had to put some of the good stuff in there. So if you could get drafted into the army and have to serve, go all the way to South Vietnam, you were targeted by COINTELPRO if you looked to be a revolutionary. You were distracted and set aside if you were sitting there watching TV all day. So it was a very tough time to be around, because you didn't have those poignant movements like you had during the 60s. Well, the student movement, and we got the this and this and that. So it was a different time. So when you think about Vietnam, the number one story of Black power during that time, I think about it like James Brown, because of the Say It Loud, Black and I'm Proud, and he just embodied Blackness in so many different ways, not just how he looked. You had Huey Newton and the Panthers. You had Amiri Baraka and the Black Arts Movement. And the biggest star of them all was Muhammad Ali, the world champion. You had this young man who was known as Cassius Clay, 1960, won a gold medal in boxing. Brass, young, handsome boxer who was an epitome of Black power, in that prior to that, the world champion was a respectable man. He was a Jackie Robinson type, a Sidney Poitier type, an acceptable Negro who shook hands and was just grateful to be there, and honor to his race. You speak so well. And you got Ali coming being, I'm pretty, I'm this, I'm floating like a butterfly, I'm me. I don't gotta be you. I get to be what I want to be. And people hated him for it. They loved it for him at first when they just was entertained by it. But when he stood up and said who he truly was, they hated him for it, for the same thing. Kind of like Colin Kaepernick to a certain extent. Kaepernick a lot. Well, NFL quarterback during that time. He didn't win a Super Bowl, but a big name star playing in Super Bowls, commercials everywhere, big name. But are you willing to put it on the line? So won the gold medal in 64. He challenges Sonny Liston to a world championship fight. And during this time, he's also building this relationship with the Nation of Islam and with our main man, Malcolm X. We just can't keep going without talking about Brother Malcolm, right? He was everywhere during this time. And so people were starting to say, we see Malcolm X around you. What the heck is going on? Like, imagine seeing, let's see, who was one of, imagine seeing Shador Sanders. We'll just use that for example, next to a revolutionary, political, religious leader that America hated. You're like, what? They already hate him just for being a little young brother. But seeing LeBron when he was young, or any of these young guys now around somebody like that, it was, started to be a problem. And so he wouldn't tell necessarily if he was or if he wasn't Muslim, but he was going to try to win this title. So, he was affiliated with Malcolm X, who was a leader in the Nation of Islam that taught Black pride, self-resilience, self-determination, self-defense. To make a long story short, Ali, or Clay at the time, he beats Liston, he wins the world championship, and right after that, he goes public about his affiliation with the Nation of Islam. So imagine your Super Bowl champion today, your NBA Finals MVP, the biggest star, your college football quarterback on the playoff team, coming out and saying he with them. So that made 99% of America hate him. And those of us, loved him. So he became the world champ. Changed his name to Muhammad Ali. Like, this took balls, yo. Like, this took gall. It took a spiritual belief. Because you don't just do this just because you want to. A couple years ago, we saw Naomi Osaka, one of my favorite tennis players, take on the burden of culture and her run to winning the U.S. Open and the effect that it had on her. We saw Colin Kaepernick try to do a similar thing. Kenny Stills do a similar thing. The brothers from the brothers who I forget their names now. I had them in my list for next week, who gave the Black Power fist during the Olympics in '68. We saw people take this on, and what it cost you, and we'll see what it cost Ali as well. So this area is so complex and fascinating. Knowing the diversity of thought and the various movements and the influences that existed, the lessons of this area shaped our future now. Facts, 100. I couldn't have said it better than myself, sis. And so Spring of 64, Ali travels to Ghana, Nigeria, and Egypt. If you remember, Malcolm X, he did the same after he left the nation, went over to Africa. This is that Pan-African part of the game that the Nation of Islam was able to put on you, that Garvey was trying to put on you, that W.E.B. Du Bois was trying to put on you. So Black power is with the fist urban Black like Huey, but it's also international Black like those guys I just named. So it's such an interesting thing is how we define this power dynamic. And so this trip, he's a rock star. He's a James Brown did the same thing. He went over there too. And we'll talk about that later and just connected with the people because American culture was being consumed 100%. So to make a long story short, he comes back and he fights 65. He fights Floyd Patterson, who was another one. And let me take a step back. Those who were acceptable men and men of standard, men who may be of served in the service, because that was a way we showed our manhood in this country. I'm going to stand strong. I'm going to be a Christian man. I'm going to fight in the service, a Revolutionary War. I'm going to fight in the Civil War. I'm going to fight in World War I. I'm going to fight in World War II. I'm going to be who I need to be to navigate this society and show that I buy into America. So that's a very important part of who we are. But during this time, they were saying, look, all that, we want to fight the power that be. And so he's fighting Floyd Patterson. And, like Malcolm was doing to his contemporaries, Ali was calling people this and calling people that, you Uncle Tom, you were this, you were that. And then he said, okay, well, I'm gonna call you Clay. And that's the one thing that the Muslims in general, but Muhammad Ali more specifically, he ain't like that. So they fought and he beat him. Ali won. And this was in 1965. December 65. We sent 180 troops to Vietnam, and 4 months after the win against Patterson, he gets drafted. He requested a deferment as a minister and as a conscientious objector, and then he said, "My enemies, my enemies are the people here. Ain't none of my enemies in Vietnam. I'm fighting the enemy here at home." Having to imagine your favorite athlete having the gall to say that. Like, I love Jaylen Brown. Jaylen Brown is somebody I got a lot of love for. And he don't say all this, but he does. He say enough. You know what I'm saying? For me, Jaylen Brown from the Celtics. But imagine your favorite athlete who don't got to. You play your sport. You show us a different thing. But taking that role, man, imagine LeBron doing something like that. And that's for my generation. Imagine somebody like that. Imagine Mike doing something like that. It would have been crazy. That's why we loved Kaepernick so much for doing it. And so the Illinois Boxing Commission, he had a fight coming. Your mama call you Clay, I'm gonna call you Clay. Right? Your mama call him Clay, I'm gonna call him Clay. Well, that he would have been pissed off at that old man too. So the Illinois Boxing Commission asked for an apology. He had a fight. He's a world champion, so he had a fight there. He said, "I'm sorry for not saying it to the public officials. I shouldn't have said it to the press. I should have said it to the politicians." And then that's when he became public enemy number one. The fight was canceled. But because he was a man of the world, his next 4 fights were outside of the U.S. And so during this time, he was receiving death threats, people throwing rocks at his house, people trying to shoot at his home, everything you can imagine from America for somebody being brass and being strong and standing for what they believe. But on the other side of it, and this ain't my side, but I like trying to give both sides of the equation. They're saying, well, look, this is what somebody like Jackie Robinson said. Well, you have a profession here in this country, and it afforded you a really good lifestyle. See how you live? See the things you can do? You see the impact you have? That's due to your service in this country. The most you can do, now he was a veteran as well, though. Least you could do is serve. And they tried this a lot. So Jackie Robinson served, the Brown Bomber, Joe Louis served, but he had to serve a different way. Right at his height, they drafted him. And so, but he served in a different way. But Ali was different in saying, no, this goes against my moral code of who I am, what my spiritual belief, who I am. It took courage for Muhammad Ali to speak truth to power. Yeah, it did. It did. And it eventually cost him. At the height of his career, I'm going to just fast forward. At the height of his career, he was stripped of the title. That's like saying after who won the NBA championship this year? Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. or Patrick Mahomes, or no, Jalen Hurts, let's say, from Philadelphia. Imagine him standing up, and he did stand up. He said, I ain't going to the White House, and I ain't going, and that's it. I had something else to do. Imagine them stripping him of his ability to play for the next few years, your prime years. He was willing to give it up. And the fact that he was willing to give it up enthralled him so much more to the brothers at home, to the brothers overseas in the motherland, to everybody that looked to stand and say, he had everything to lose. You the world champ, you about to lose your title, you about to lose your money, you about to lose your position in society, you're going to lose it all. And he was willing to give it all up for what he believed. I got 2 sons. I teach them about Ali in that, you know, after Malcolm, after some of the thinkers, but Ali in that he stood up for what he believed in. He was willing to give it up. Take the title, take the money, take the fame. I'll be the enemy. I'll be that. I'll be that, because I stand on something different than that. That's what Black Power was about. It ain't the money. We don't give a fuck about that. It ain't the social status in this society. I don't care about that. It ain't about playing no game in no ring. I don't care about that. I'm standing on something bigger than that. I'm doing it my way. And I'm not gonna, if it means jail, then I'm going to jail. Lock me up. What movie was that? Lock me up. And he ain't want to get locked up, but you know, lock me up. Put me in there, because I'm gonna stand for what I believe. More than that. Take your money. Take the fight. My gift from God is to be able to get in this ring and fight. But I got another calling as well, and I'm standing on that. And that's what makes me so indebted to Ali as I teach about him, and as I learn. Who else has been willing to give it up? All the people we look at, who was willing to give it up? Who was really willing to give it up? And in true fashion, and giving it up in 1970. Well, I'm going too fast. Let me slow down a little bit. So he was sentenced to 5 years in prison. He went to Houston in April of 67. He refused to be drafted. They sentenced him to 5 years, which he appealed. In the long trial that happened, it's a movie, I forgot the name of it. I'll drop it in the link. 1970, the Supreme Court overturned the conviction, and 4 years later, he would defeat George Foreman in Zaire. And you know, he goes down as one of the most loved, hated, and then loved in his older age heroes ever. And you know, outside of my history, you know, loving and knowing history, when the Ali I saw growing up was the one who was, you know, holding the Olympic torch and was doing that, and you know, more of, you know, that part. But you know, going back and seeing this tall, handsome, whoop you in the ring, it mattered in my spiritual life. I ain't nobody perfect. He still lived a life. He still was a person. Don't get it twisted. But I give that's another great example of what Black Power is. So we started it talking about Black Power being defined through a few of our ancestors that I chose to put on there. Ida B could have been on there. Ida B. Wells, Fannie Lou Hamer could have been on that list. Sojourner Truth from who rested in Battle Creek. Any of the sisters, Harriet Tubman. Any of these sisters could have been Diane Nash, Rosa Parks. Any of these sisters, anybody that we could have been, that we talked about, could have been on that list in our Black Power ideology. We've always wanted power. What was this different about this time is, one, we looked at how Stokely defined it. We looked at how culturally we were defining it through riot and protest. We looked at it, we talked about it, how we looked at it through entertainment and elected politics and music and business, which we'll get later on through this course. And now we looked at it through what it means to be unapologetically yourself, not fall for what the society wants you to, and standing on your on 10 toes down, as we would say, as Muhammad Ali did here. So I want to stop there today. Part 2 of this conversation, 1966 to 1968, we're going to center it around the birth and the explosion of the Black Panther Party in Oakland. We're going to center it around Amiri Baraka and his the birth and the explosion of the Black Arts Movement. We're also going to look at Stokely Carmichael and his transition with SNCC Corps and some of their work. And then we're going to still weave in Vietnam and what was going on with the Bloods, the black men in fighting in Vietnam. If you saw the movie Dead Presidents, I can tell you a bit about that story, or Another movie, I forget the name of it. I don't want to belabor it. We're also going to talk more about Black elected officials. In the 70s, you got Coleman Young in Detroit. You got LA. You got Newark. The places that had the biggest riots, they ended up with Black mayors in the 70s. And we'll talk about the irony that comes along with that. We'll talk about Black business, Berry Gordy, the Johnson Publishing Company. We'll talk about A.G. Gaston. We'll talk about Soul Train and Don Cornelius and what they were building. And we'll talk about how these Black mayors opened opportunities through government contracts, building down in Maynard Jackson in Atlanta. We'll talk about how Soul Train went to be one of the top TV shows on TV, how Good Times, how the Mac and Shaft and James Brown and Sly and the Family Stone, all of these interesting things happening, representing power for our culture, not just, some of the political stuff. And, we know how that story ends. Let's see, to make sure I got my Vietnam and Black Power. Yep. So any questions, any feedback, anything before we get on out of here? I want to thank everybody for your time today. This has been it's our boy Jagger Hoover and Dual War, domestic and in Vietnam, Black Arts Movement, the figures and the unifying voices in art, and then some of the points on the timeline. And just a summary of the foundations, brother Stokely Carmichael. So I'm a big ADOS. I keep saying that I'm a big ADOS guy. I believe in that. I think that we all have a place in the diaspora, but I truly, and I stand on 10 toes down that those whose lineage comes from slavery is a bit different, and it needs to be recognized and observed. But a couple of my favorite cats are not ADOS, and he's one of them. Born in the islands and came here. Garvey, born in the islands and came here. And so for me to lift up my Howard brother like that is saying I do have a Pan-Africanist perspective as well. I do think there needs to be, there'll never be unity, but there does need to be open doors in the diaspora. So it takes a lot for me to say, as I am ADOS and I believe ADOS, Stokely is somebody that really opened the door. And I think that when we think about Black power, and we'll talk about it as we move forward, these brothers just weren't burning down buildings and shooting cops. They were looking for intellectual, political ways to organize our people, and looking at, and we all say, why was they always looking at Marxists and Leninism and Theniism and all this stuff? They were looking at people who were able to overthrow the situations they were in and looking to see if those political ideologies could match for our people here. So a lot of people went to Marxism. A lot of people went to socialism. A lot of people went to looking at internationally to say, well, how was this happening? Well, at the same time, we was looking for rights here in the motherland. Our African brothers and sisters were turning over colonialism, and people were doing it different ways. Frantz Fanon wrote great works. So it was political thought that was really looking to bring this thing to hoe here. So I want to thank everybody for your time today. This intellectual, ideological, cultural renaissance, we're going to be on this ride together for another 9 weeks, and I'm looking forward to it. You can depend on me. Look, next week, my birthday on the 3rd. I'm still gonna be here because that's one, it means something to me, and two, it don't stop just because you was born. You got to keep it moving. I'm gonna celebrate and enjoy it. Don't get it twisted, but I'm gonna be here because I know this is important. And like my main man Pac said, and I usually say this at the beginning of any podcast I'm on, it said, I might not change the world. This is what he said, but I guarantee you, I'm gonna spark the mind that will change the world. And that's what I hope to do with this information. Just real talk, we're gonna have some courage in these days. We're gonna have to be willing to stand up for what we believe in. We're gonna have to be willing to lose that bag. We're gonna have to make some sacrifices to ensure that our next generation do know about this stuff, because they erasing it, right? They looking forward to not being it for us not to be able to tell these stories, right? They want to rewrite this stuff, right? So I'm even more emboldened to say, I don't care what it takes. I want there to be some kind of record of knowing what happened during Jim Crow, what happened during Reconstruction, what happened during civil rights, what happened during Black power, what happened during slavery, what happened. That's our history. And we can't let them rewrite it. We can't let them erase it. So every day I see them try to say, well, we're going to take the museum and we're going to change it. Well, I'm going to make sure I'm going to change my message double then. I'm going to do the class for free. I ain't got to sell no courses. I ain't got to sell no curriculum. I want y'all to know this stuff. I want you to know they're trying to rewrite us. So I don't know it all, but I was on that class and he did say something and he did give me some links so I can pass it on. I can tell this story. So it's important to me that we continue to tell this story. They want to take it away. They don't want our history to be here. They don't want us to know that we come from, we come from kings and queens, but we do come from kings and queens. They may not have had the power, they may not have had the crown, but they had the mind to say, from our ancestors who were brought here to where we are today, you can't tell me we don't got fight. You can't tell me we got soul. That's why people love James Brown. I got soul, and I'm super bad. I got soul, baby. And that's what the funk, revolution brought. But I can go on forever. I want y'all to enjoy y'all night. I want y'all to enjoy this class, and I want you to come back, like and share, subscribe to this YouTube page if you're watching it there. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. Yep, we come from greatness, and we're gonna be doing this. So I ain't got to ring it out tonight. We're gonna be back next week, and we're gonna hit you with the next part of the 66 to 68, and we're gonna get you some good stories as well. So thank you for everybody here. I see the numbers. I'm feeling them today. And I will be back next week. Peace. And as our ancestors would say during this time, all power to the people. Peace.